Welcome to Supernormal M, the channel that's sort of a channel and, well, maybe it's not. But if you found this, greetings. So I don't have an elaborate plan this time. The first video I made, I tried to make a template in order to continue under such manner. However, since my channel seems to be ghosted or I'm just too old to understand how that stuff works, I'm going to do something a little bit different to chum the waters, so to speak. So, this is going to be just another one of my... Yes, Gecko, I know. This is going to be another one of my accounts. So, you might have heard of something called a residual haunting. It's also got names that I hear called the stone tape theory, or echo hauntings, or imprint hauntings. This is actually maybe the third thing that I recall, chronologically speaking, in my life. And as you can see today, we're at the beach. Hopefully nobody has a weak bladder because there will be ocean sounds. And truck sounds because there's trucks behind me. Don't know why they put roads next to beaches. That should be a sin. If anybody has a lighter, I gotta find my own. Yes, I am addicted to tobacco. So, my residual haunting story, or at least one of them. I must have been at that point in time about 13 years old. I was living in a house that was pretty newly built, and outside of that house it was surrounded by a whole lot of woods, or forest, or what have you. It was in the northeast, so I'm going to call it woods. So, my father was a bit of a character. And, because of said character, I spent a lot of time a little bit farther away from the house than inside of it when I could. I took it upon myself to build a little house, so to speak. I found a bunch of these weird vertical metal rebar constellation things. These things that were like maybe 13 feet tall and a foot wide, if that. They were like two vertical little thin rebar pieces with little cross hatchings. So I dragged a bunch of them outside. My cigarette went out. Tisk, tisk. So I dragged like 20 or 30 of these things. I dragged them off into the woods. I found a big old pine tree at the time. There's really only pine trees, but I picked one that I liked. And I sort of, pseudo-teepeed them. So I stacked a bunch of these vertical metal rebar constellations up against this tree to make a tree teepee of sorts. It was winter at the time, and there was 4 pine trees that were all pretty equidistantly spaced. So I put all these pieces of metal around teepee style around the largest of those 4 trees. After I did that, I went around collecting random branches and what have you, and I made sort of a thatched little hut out of it. And then after that hut, I made a perimeter within those 4 trees, with that one tree being sort of the house portion of the area. Actually, a lot of things happened in that area. But the first one, which was while I was building it, refers to this idea of a residual haunting, or at least where I fully understood what that concept really meant. So, obviously, these are things where people claim that maybe a particular event or an emotion are recorded into the environment, like a replaying or a repetitive, unchanging phenomenon. I actually wound up using this as an English. In middle school, I used it for an English class. But anyway, so as I'm building this pseudo teepee thing, I kept noticing sort of down off the hill there, and there was, the whole floor is made of dead leaves, but the terrain in the northeast anyway, in a lot of folks' woods around their house, you'll notice that there's all these stone walls. At the time, I didn't know what the reason for these stone walls were, but later on as I grew up, I learned that those are basically old school property markers. So down the hill, next to a property marker line, which I just thought of as a stone wall at the time, I noticed a weird phenomenon, I guess. Now, I'm a pretty busy beaver. When I'm doing something, I pretty much stick to it and I don't let anything, distract me from it. So I'm trying to ignore this weird feeling, and I'm grabbing all these metal things, trying not to get, not tinnitus, what is that disease from rust? You know the one. Trying not to get that disease from rust where you get lockjaw. So I'm carefully placing all of these things up along the tree. I have the perimeter built at this point. Yes, that was my dog's ears. And I noticed down that hill sort of a mirage type situation happening. It almost looked like heat off the highway, except, this ain't no highway. This is the woods in the northeast during winter. But I'm seeing that sort of hazy effect. And I'm noticing it. Don't really hear anything odd. I don't really feel anything odd. But like I said, I'm a busy beaver, so I'm trying to ignore everything and just get the job done. But after about 8 or 10 minutes or so, I couldn't ignore it. It was too obvious. When people say they see weird things, they always mention their peripherals or having some strange feeling or sixth sense, and I was just looking at it. Between two sort of deadish birch trees, I saw that weird haze, and it was growing stronger, almost like in Donnie Darko. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but those portals that they sort of capture in Donnie Darko, or rather than capture, they depict. It looked like that going in between these two birch trees. Pretty dead birch trees. As an adult, I would have looked for chaga in those. Don't know if anybody's ever had that, but it's kind of neat. So I'm noticing that weird hazy thing. I put down my last piece of kind of rusty metal, and I look over there. I don't sit down because I don't want my butt to get wet, but I'm standing there and I'm sort of shaking. And keep in mind, I'm 5 to 10 minutes away from my house, I would say, if you were to walk through the snow. Wouldn't say that I was scared, but I was confused. And then I sort of see something that looks like a dog. And I'm going, what? And I'm sort of backing behind a tree now because, I don't want to deal with a random dog right now. I did have a crappy bow and arrow at the time, but I don't think that I was 13 or something. So anyway, I see this sort of dog going from that one tree in the hazy area to the tree adjacent to it. And like I said, I was confused, but I started to hear a sound too. It was sort of like a jingling of keys. And I only saw this shape that looked like a dog, and this must have been 40, 50 feet away. I'm terrible with measurements, but okay, maybe 100 feet away. Far enough away that it would look a little bit blurry, even if he had good eyesight. So I'm thinking I'm seeing this dog. Went from that one birch tree to the second birch tree. I thought, well, that's weird. And I'm hearing that jingling of keys. And then I'm seeing somebody walking the dog, I think. And I go, well, I haven't seen a single person out in these woods ever. And I frequent these places. And it's winter. And in the winter, it's pretty quiet. No birds. Not really anything. And at this point in time, it was the first occurrence that I experienced in that area. There were more to come, but that was the first one, so there was no red flags at the time, other than, thank God, I'm not at home right now. So, I see this guy walking a dog, going through from the first birch tree to the second birch tree. I can't figure out where he wound up, because I thought maybe the dog walked from the left tree to the right tree, and then that was pretty much it. And then, the second or third time, I thought this dog was making loops, and on the second or third time, I heard that jingling. And then I noticed that whatever this thing is, it's on repeat, not going in circles. It's actually a man, and he seems to be wearing a brown sort of, now that I'm old, I can tell that it was a, sheep's fur coat. What is that called? Why do these words elude me? Wool. A wool trench coat, a brown wool trench coat. Buttons up the right side. I forget if it's male or female with the right side buttons, but it was this man walking his dog, and it was sort of a, those dogs they use for racing, sort of thin dogs. Not a Doberman, but a Greyhound. Aha, I came up with something. So he's walking this Greyhound-looking dog from the birch tree on the left to the birch tree on the right. And it was on loop. I remember I saw it the second time, and I was like, okay, this is for sure a guy walking his dog. And then when I saw it the third time, it clarified for me that this was not somebody walking around in circles, because it literally played and then didn't rewind, it just looped. It was like 1999 TikTok. It just kept playing. But the weird thing was each time it was playing, it kind of appeared more and more opaque. But keep in mind, it started with that weird haziness, I guess you could say. So I wound up making a book report on it, or whatever the assignment was for English class in 7th grade, or whatever grade you'd be in, being 13 or so. And that was my first occurrence that I had with a, whatever English you want to use for that sort of ghost. A residual haunting, or an echo haunting, or an imprint haunting. I'm going to keep this in theme. And then since you already have the setup, and I know a lot of these scary stories have like let's just say a setup period for the story. Since you already get the general layout of where I'm talking about, I'm going to say my second story that happened at the same location. Same season too. Maybe a month and a half later. But still winter. So, at this particular time, my teepee is fully constructed. I've thatched it with pine branches, making it so that way you can't see through it. And at this point, the snow had fallen to where it was completely covered. So if you crawled inside of it, you couldn't see outside of it. And from the outside, you most certainly couldn't see inside of it. So I guess I meant the outside from the inside. You know what I mean. Getting pedantic with myself. So it's 9:30 at night, I want to say. And I've gotten over the residual haunting thing because, well, it only happened once, and it did wind up happening again on a sort of anniversary of the same day the next year, but let's stick with the current year that we're talking about here. So I'm inside my little teepee pseudo thing. And like I said, it's all pretty much covered. I have vertical downward branches along my outside perimeter, so think 4 feet up a tree with long other trees that I cut down, making this big square with vertical branches going down. So if you were to stand up inside of this maybe 12 by 12 foot square, you could only see the top half of me if you were standing outside of it. But I'm inside of my little teepee cave thing. I have a fire going in the center. I managed to find, or rather borrow, I want to say, some candles from my house at the time, and I shoved them inside of the thatched branches that were making up my teepee. So I had sort of a cool 45-degree angle candle, sort of just hanging maybe a foot long inside of my little hut. I'm using that to pretend that it's warm and to be able to see, I guess. And this particular story could easily be debunked as being some sort of an animal because, well, it is sort of an animal. But let me tell you exactly how it went down. So I'm inside my little hut. I can't hear any of the sounds from my house at this point. It's gotta be 1999 or somewhere along there. I'm sitting there with the candlelight and I'm appreciating the fact that, well, I can see. And I feel warm enough. I'm in one of those old school snowsuits. I don't know if you've ever worn one of those, but basically like wearing a giant pillow, and when it's winter everything's soft, so it might as well be. So I can see, and I'm in my own little space, and I'm feeling pretty proud of myself that I completed this thing, and, well, it looks better than I thought. The snow pretty much did most of the work after I did what I did. And then I hear what I thought at the time, and still kind of do think, as like a deer. Sort of one of those loud breathing out of their nose sort of things. And I'm going, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I do not want to deal with this. At this point in time, I don't believe I had any sort of weapon beyond a hatchet or whatever I was using as a hatchet at the time. Didn't feel particularly safe. And then I noticed it was circling, well, semi-circling my hut thing, you know, in almost an open sea, because the inside of the sea would be that, the inside of my little area square I was telling you about. So it was going in that C shape, and I heard the walking going along the outside of my hut thing, and it was going back and forth like it was tracing it, and I could hear the hooves. And then I heard that, and I was like, okay, well, if this is a deer, what interest does it have in me? And my fire is essentially embers at this point. My candle's going strong. I'm thinking to myself, am I going to try to run out of here? Am I going to try to hoof it back to my house? And at this point, all I had was that candle, so you can't exactly run with it. So I'm getting more and more and more freaked out, because to me, what business does a deer have with my little hut? And why is it attracted to the light, or the light of the fire at least? Couldn't for the life of me put those two together. And then I see two lights. And keep in mind, I'm in a thatched, snow-covered hut that's lit from the inside looking out. I use my two fingers and poke two little eye holes until my fingers melted the snow in the thatch. And I sort of position myself so I can be looking outside of it. And I can see these two glows. Immediately, once I saw the glows, I got even more scared. I was already, I wasn't quite shitting myself, but I was scared. The glow wasn't a weird, alien-like glow or anything theatrical. It looked like two candles, maybe 4.5, 5 feet high. And I could still hear these hooves walking in that C shape. And I was seeing these two glowing lights, 4.5 feet high up, 5 feet, something like that. My heart's racing. Oh, I remember. I did have a hatchet. I grabbed my grandfather's hatchet, which is, I wish I still had it, but it was nice. It was one of those stereotypical brands that you saw in like old books and stuff, like the slightly bent handle, black handle. So I'm holding it, and I blow out my candle, because I can't quite see from the glow outside my tent. I was looking through those holes, and I was scared, and since I could see light out there, I blew my light out, and thought it would be easier to not have to look through those holes and just to be able to back my back up against the tree and be able to still look out and trace what was going on. And it was indeed two lights. And it was indeed fire. I thought, did this connect to my fire somehow? And I bend forward and I look to my left, and my fire is essentially coals at this point. It was going quite a bit more before I saw the glow from outside of my little thatched thing. And I come to find out that it seems to be candles, just like the candle that I had. And they seem to be nestled within what seemed to me like the height of antlers on this deer. It doesn't make another noise. It doesn't do anything theatrically. The end of the story isn't going to be good is basically what I'm driving at. I notice that the candles are in the deer. I'm standing there, rather sitting with my back against that tree in the middle of the hut in the dark, and my fire's basically out at this point. And I just take it upon myself to run like hell back to my house. Fell only 3 times. Only thing that was scary was second time I fell. Not the first time, but the second time I fell. I looked back behind me like an idiot, and I saw those same 2 lights, and it was definitely fire. And they were strafing. It wasn't coming at me, but it was strafing to my left. Kept running back home. The Totem Pole. This is a random little, spooky adventure story. That's true. Pretty much. Well, not pretty much. 100% all the stories I tell are my experiences. They might not always be exciting, but if you want to have a friendly voice to listen to, well, I'm here and I'm telling them. Every state, I'm pretty sure, has state routes or routes, whatever you want to call it. And I was on a state route in my state. I'm walking back from high school. I never took the bus. I'm sure most people do, but I grew a quick hatred for the bus in elementary school, and that carried out through high school. So I preferred to walk, an hour plus instead of taking the bus. Seemed like less ball ache. So I'm walking up the state route. I'd stopped tripping over myself here. I stopped by a bread store. I don't even know if that exists anymore. It was a store that sold exclusively bread, which I can't even eat anymore. But I grabbed like some sort of a big baguette. It was awesome, sesame seeds and all that stuff, and I would just stop at this place often, every time I'd be walking home, just so I could feel like I was Lord of the Rings or something, eating a big hunk of stuff. So I'm eating out the inside of my loaf, sort of just picking at it and balling it up and eating it like a weirdo. And apparently, I don't know if your state has this, but they have these weird giant lawnmowers that they put along the highway. This wasn't necessarily a highway, it was a state route, but close enough. 2 lanes. And they have those giant lawnmower things where they have like the blades that sort of jut out to the side, only on one side, with a big row of these cutters. And I'm following it, and it's smelling like, wet grass and what have you. There's a lot of traffic at the time. This is probably spring. And I'm happy to be able to walk rather than on the sidewalk where there's a bunch of crap and stuff in the road. I'm happy to be able to walk in the grass because it's neatly cut and the guy's going faster than I can walk. So I'm like, hey, I'll take it. So I'm walking up the grass, and he's got his blade at like maybe a 50-degree angle, because along this state route, there is sort of a hill that goes up to the left. So I'm sort of enjoying my deer-like pattern as I sort of go left and right around, so I'm not walking faster than the guy can mow, because I'm enjoying the pathway. And then I look up to my left. It's all pine trees on my left. And you're looking up a road that goes on forever in front of you. And up and left, which I'd never noticed before, and I'd walked this for years, I saw a giant totem pole. It was a distance away and all the way at the top of a hill, and it had a beard on it. Think of, maybe you've seen some of these hobby shops where these sort of old school hippies sell these weird woodland, bearded, sculpted wood things that look like one of those, if you know what I'm talking about. I wonder if they have a name. But it looked like that on the top of a totem pole. And anywhere in New England, there's a lot of Native American, for short, let's just call it action. A lot of Native American action in the area. So I thought, hey, cool, totem pole. I'm gonna go ahead and walk up there. So, accumulating ticks as I climb up the hill. And near the top, once I'm getting through the thicker parts of it, immediately I'm met with a thorn bush. And keep in mind, once you're going up this hill, you can no longer keep your eye on that totem pole that you saw from the very bottom. So, just about to get to the top of this hill, where it's very thick, and like I said, I bumped into this thorn bush. Not really a bush, it's more like a thorn barricade. I tried going left and right around it to see if I could, save myself the torture. But unfortunately, it looked to me that there was no way to find the end of this mystery other than going through the thorn bush. So I take the hit, go through the thorn bush. I'm on the other side of the thorn bush now, and I'm taking out inch-long, well, you know what's. And beyond the thorn bush, it was actually quite surprising. Beyond the thorn bush, I'm shaking all these, I don't know what you call them, all those stinging nettles and stuff off me, and I'm pulling them all off my clothes. And then I look up, and I see a badminton field. There's no houses. There's literally off the side of the state highway or road or whatever you want to call it, there's 2 giant totem poles. They seem like they were made of marble, honestly. At least that's what I thought they were when I was 16 or whatever I may have been. 2 massive totem poles, maybe 20 feet apart from each other, looking at each other. So you had one giant old guy head staring at another giant old guy head. They looked almost the same, but much like somebody's face isn't quite symmetrical, they were the same idea, but maybe a little bit of a different take on it, you could say. And in between that, surrounded by a perfect square of thorn bushes, was a badminton, or at least I took it as a badminton field at the time. Guess it could have been volleyball or something else, but to me, as a badminton advocate, I saw it as a badminton field. So I'm staring at it, and I'm thinking, whoa, you're telling me 15 minutes from my high school, in the middle of the woods, there's a badminton field? And this has got to be 2004, something like that. So I'm standing here, and I'm looking at all these giant totem poles. I'm inspecting they have multiple heads going up vertically. Like I said, the top were these old men, the middle were these birds, and the bottom were these sort of faceless, masked-looking humanoid faces. And they get more and more clean as they reach the top, meaning the tops almost looked polished. I don't know if that's from foliage growing over time that simply grew on the bottom and didn't quite reach the top, but at the time it looked like somebody had climbed it and just polished the top. So I'm standing there, I'm thinking, oh, cool, I'm going to try to bring my friend over here, play some secret badminton. And then all of a sudden, I'm feeling this pain. It's almost like your appendix bursting, or, well, what I would later find out would feel like your appendix bursting, but at the time I just felt pain. And I started to feel faint. I literally passed out, maybe 5 feet from the median, and I woke up several hours later halfway down that hill. When I woke up, I didn't know where or what I was, or really what I was doing. But I did sort of try to shake it off, and I looked back up the hill, and I still saw those 2 heads. So naturally, I continued to walk home. It took me a couple hours, and not that anybody cared. But when I got home, it was, at the time, in that year, Google Earth did exist. It was sort of a new thing, but my first thought was, hey, I'd like to verify if there's a house next to this thing, because if I'm going to bring a buddy up there, I don't need somebody showing up with a gun and shooting my head off. So I'm on Google Earth, and I'm looking at it. And granted, the only image on Google Earth that has a little timestamp that shows when the picture from the satellite was taken, it seemed like it was a year prior to, well, when I was there. So point is that there's nothing on Google Earth there at all. So I'm not seeing on Google Earth. I obviously was there. I go back the next week with my friend. We try to get up there. We're walking up, and it's overgrown quite a bit more from it being freshly mowed. And my friend starts puking all over himself. We're about halfway up the hill, and, well, actually, he has a little bit of a history of puking when there's something weird going on. So he's puking all over himself, and he's trying to reassure me that he's fine and we should keep going. And I'm unfortunately disgusted at this point, and I say, you know what, dude, let's just not go up there today. Let's try another day. And then I forgot about it, and I'm only retelling the story now. I should probably check it out. Unknown city in Nevada. So, as you can tell, I'm not reading from written material, so there will be a lot of random stops and gaps. But since my channel is sort of shadow banned and I'm not really talking to anybody, I'm just gonna roll with this. Just for myself and whoever might care. There's something neat about putting your thoughts down somewhere. So at the time, it must be 2004 maybe. And actually no, maybe 2006. At one point, I was flown out to California, or to Hollywood, because some people up top thought that I might be a hot shot, so they flew me out. Didn't work out, by the way. It worked quite to the antithesis. Yet, I tried my second go at it. And this time, instead of being flown out and having all my expenses paid, this time I drove my crappy car across the country. So at this particular point in time, I don't know if cell phones existed or not, but I did have a giant map, you know, the kind that folds 16 times, and every time you fold it, you're wondering, how the hell did this happen? So I'm somewhere in Nevada. This is just after an electrical storm, which is a different story that I'll probably tell after this one. This is a short one. So I'm looking at my map, and I'm driving on a big-ass straightaway. I pass a couple towns. It's now maybe an hour past that. I pass some of the little ghost town-looking places. You know, the ones that have facades of buildings that have attic-looking shapes, and yet there's nothing there, you know, like they look taller than they actually are. They're actually one-story buildings, and it looks like these little semi-triangles as roofs, or what I thought at the time were attics, but then as you drive by, they're just facades. Extra brick or whatever material they're made out of, just to look like an attic. So I pass a couple of these towns, and now I'm on, yet again, a state road. And after about an hour, I'm seeing all these, like a field of lights in the distance. So, naturally, I pull over and I take my map out. I'm looking at the map and I'm going, what the heck city is this? Because I'm seeing it from, well, if you were staring straight at the road, and from the left side of your point of view all the way to the right is a sea of lights. I'm thinking, okay, well, if I came from this road, then what city or town am I looking at? Well, long story short, there was no city on the map. I don't know if I was lost, but I did have a compass, and I was going west, so... So far, so good, I thought to myself. I keep driving. I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm stupid, but I'm going west, so whatever. And right as I'm hitting the city, well, how old was I? 18 or something like that. And I'm a millennial, so an 18-year-old millennial is a little bit different than an 18-year-old Gen X or an 18-year-old, well, baby boomer. And certainly different from an 18-year-old Generation Z. But let me reposition myself in this tiny chair. I get into the actual city, quote-unquote, which, like I said, I described it as a sea of lights, but when you actually get into the thing, it looked more like kind of nothing. Looked like little residential neighborhoods, like pseudo-suburbs of some kind. I'm looking around for road signs. I'm not seeing any. I see a liquor store, and I'm like, well, at that point in time, I didn't drink or do anything wrong, really. Didn't have a reason to, which, well, maybe I did, but I didn't think so. Ignorance is bliss. So it takes me, I don't stop in the town because I'm by myself, and I'm not looking to be killed because, well, ignorance may be bliss, but the unknown is something to fear, especially in those years, both age-wise and, literally. So it takes me 3 or 4 minutes to get through this town. I didn't go left or right. I stayed going west. Another hour and a half down the road, maybe 2 hours. Passing a bunch of cactuses, which at the time, to me, were awesome because I'm used to trees. Cactuses were far more exciting at that age, when you don't see them. So, I get to a town. It was overnight, like I said. But at this point, a couple hours passed, so I must have been going through that town at like 4 in the morning, and now it's 6. I stop at a gas station, and I ask him, what's that town back there? Maybe, an hour back. The guy said, he was really hard to understand, by the way. He said, what town? I said, the town maybe an hour or 2 back east. There ain't no town 2 hours east. And I thought, well, fuck me. Pretty sure I went through a town, but sleep deprivation can be a hell of a drug, I guess. I said I would tell this little story, which was something that happened previous to this one, so it must have been somewhere in Oklahoma. And for those of you that don't know, in Oklahoma, at least at the time, there are toll booths, but there are not people working at the toll booths. So, picture this. Sort of Dumb and Dumber-esque. You know that scene where Lloyd is speaking to Harry, and I think Harry is walking at this point, and Lloyd shows up on a little 20 or 10cc scooter. It looked like that, basically, except imagine a random toll booth in the center of that endless highway. Just random grass and fields going on for miles in every direction. So I'm at this toll booth. I don't have any change at this point. The toll booth says, I don't remember if it was $1.50 or 50 cents, but whatever it was, I didn't have exact change, so I'm parking my car. There's no one around. I'm talking at it, poking at the little camera thing. At least I think it was a camera. Nothing's happening. I'm kind of too nervous to just go through the thing because, like I said, I'm pretty sure I'm looking into some sort of a lens. So I decide, okay, I'm not going to do the wrong thing. And it's not that I have no money. It's just that I don't have change to put into the little coin slot. So I'm parking my car and go back to the trunk, and I grabbed like some packing tape I had back there. And I taped like $2 or $3 onto the machine, which, thinking back, doesn't really make much sense. I thought, well, I'm a big, it's the thought that counts kind of a guy. So I'm like, well, if it's filming me and it sees me taping money to it, it knows that I tried. Excuse me. So, I tape my couple bucks to the toll booth there in the middle of Oklahoma, and I'm feeling a tingly sensation. I flip on the radio. It says, oh, there's going to be some sort of a thunderstorm going down blah, 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 blah town, whatever the hell town it was. And I'm continuing to drive, and I'm seeing the mile markers go by, and then I see the town sign come up. And I'm like, oh, it's such and such town that it just said on the radio. I guess there's like a electrical storm going on here. So my face, and now I've had a long history of medical conditions, and couldn't really tell what was wrong with me at the time, to be honest. I just felt tingly all over. And since I just heard on the radio that there was some sort of an electrical storm, I thought, I guess I'm feeling the electrical storm. And at the time, I had hair down to my ass. So I'm feeling my hair feeling lighter, and I'm feeling my skin all tingly, and pull up to a gas station, look at the fruity colored drinks in the little spinning machine that you'd see there, deciding if I want blue or red, which, by the way, the correct answer is blue. If it is red, we're simply different people. Been pretty addicted to blue number 1 since its inception. Until I got old, anyway. So I'm looking at the blue number 1 spinning around, and I'm trying to bring up the courage in order to, well, seem strange, which is kind of funny because I shouldn't need courage to come across as I always do. But I tell the guy behind the counter, I say, do you feel that? He goes, feel what? I say, do you feel that tingling? And he goes, no. And I'm like, I feel like my hair's sticking up, and all of my, if I tap on my arm, I feel the electricity bouncing off of me. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, hey, can I fill up my water bottle? He goes, nope. I go, why? He says, no, the water's not drinkable here. What? What do you mean the water's not drinkable? Like, you'll have to buy a bottle of water. Which at the time, to me, seemed absurd because, well, where I come from, you get it from the hose or the sink. I thought, surely there's a sink here. And he said, nope, water here lights on fire. I said, you gotta be shitting me. He goes, nope. Goes behind the counter, takes sort of a Stanley cup looking thing, fills it up, puts his hand over the top of it. And I'm going, what? And he's saying, hold on a second. Waits like 10 seconds, then takes a lighter out of his pocket, lifts his hand up, and then really quick puts the lighter in, and it goes poof. It goes on to explain to me that apparently the water in that town lights on fire, which is beside the point of the story. The point of the story is that, well, apparently that is the time that I learned I was overly sensitive to electric frequencies. Not a very cool superpower, but a sensation nonetheless. Cycling frequency. And this is not about the amount of time that I'd be riding my bike, which was pretty often, but more like a literal cycling or oscillating. That's what I should have called it. Oh well, time's passed. So it was an oscillating frequency. There's actually somebody who asked me a question about this, so I thought even if they're never going to see this video, I'm going to go ahead and answer it. Energy has a funny way of getting to the people who need it. And answers have a funny way of finding their way to the people who have questions. Although I guess that's not supported by this particular story, because I don't understand this one at all. This comes before my last two stories, but is a little bit connected. I'm in Hollywood, California. You know, before all the forest fires and stuff. It must have been 2000 something before 2010. I'm terrible with dates. But at this point in time, I'm 16 and a half, I want to say, or 17, whatever the age is that you just get out of high school. I'd been flown out to California as I was trying to make myself seem legitimate with my idea of wanting to play music. So once I decided that, I learned how to record music and got the gear for it and asked people what exactly they wanted to hear and tried to find the range, median, and mode of what it was that I had to do in order to be happy and have something to show for myself after the fact. So I wound up finding a guy with a deep voice, because that's what was in at the time, and picked a style of music that sort of sat within the realm of reason, you could say. And I have a weird taste in music, so finding something within the realm of reason is already a little bit of a task for me. So I played some form of alternative rock, I guess you could say. And I was always considered the, techie person at the time. It was mostly a bluff, but I always sort of backed it up, so maybe it was real. So I'm in Hollywood, California, and the other people in the band are doing, let's just put it nicely, stupid things. At the time, I had no interest to do such things, so I'm walking around Hollywood Boulevard. You see a lot of weird stuff on Hollywood Boulevard, I found out. Stuff that you see in movies is a little bit accurate. Except there's a lot more gum stuck to the sidewalk than you see in movies. So I see this guitar store. It's a particular brand of instruments that I was really into at the time, and I was hoping at one point later in life to be able to play. And I said, hey, this is outside the factory that makes them. I'm stepping in there. So I step inside the store and, played the nicest instruments I've ever played in my life, especially the bass guitars there, and fell absolutely in love, and the guys are getting a kick out of me having a good time, really. And it felt like I was I'm pretty sure the building was sound treated or something to that nature, because it was dead quiet in there, and all I could hear were my dreams, really. And I could feel them, too, on my fingers. So I'm trying to chat the guy up and be as charming as one can be as a stupid kid, and playing this instrument, hoping he's going to give it to me. Not that that's a logical thing to think at the time, but I'm like, maybe if I play it good enough, he'll, just give it to me. Not true. So I'm in there for 15, 20 minutes, just getting my hands on everything I can get them on. Pretty much spreading my DNA across the store and in an appropriate manner. Sorry, my voice is destroyed, but I record anyway. So after playing all these instruments and basically falling in love, because, I've never owned anything over $100, so playing these multiple $1,000 guitars had me pretty excited. I leave the store, and I'm still a little bit excited because I'm just happy I got to touch one of these things. Something special about old wood and stuff handmade. Still overly into that stuff. But the second I open the door from that sound isolation heaven, I hear this oscillating tone. And it was almost visual. I know everybody has a different sort of imagination, and my imagination is pretty logical, where same thing with my dreams, really. There's nothing fantastical or something that goes against any law of physics. So I'm hearing the sound, and my brain is seeing like a spectrograph of what I'm hearing, because if I'm hearing something, I was so used to looking at sound forms at the time that I would visualize them that way. So I was hearing an oscillating tone. It would go from the lowest conceivable tone one could hear until it went too low to be able to hear, and there'd be a little gap of audibility, or whatever word that might be. And then once it went beyond that low point, it would start oscillating up and go beyond your ability in the high frequency range with a second or two gap. So this is going to be a terrible rendition because my voice is destroyed, but you know. Sort of like that. And I'm walking around and I'm seeing all these people in their convertibles, and, well, mixed in with the convertibles, there were some, let's just say, other types of people walking around trying to get attention, and some homeless people wearing weird half costumes covered in stains. Like this one guy that was pretending to be Darth Vader with sweatpants on that was charging money to force choke people. Which I did let him force choke me. That was fun. Actually, tried to go along with it in order to draw a crowd and blew a blood vessel in my left eye. But I digress. I'm hearing this oscillating tone, and I'm asking every single person that I pass if they can hear that, because I'm absolutely dumbfounded at this point. I'm wondering what the hell it is. It doesn't sound like it's underground. It doesn't sound like it's above me. It sounds like it's all around me. This went on for my entire walk back to my, I don't really know what to call the place. It was like there's this big music studio that was on a highway that it sort of was adjacent to Hollywood Boulevard, and I heard that oscillating sound on Hollywood Boulevard. I heard it walking along the highway, and I heard it right up until I walked into a Popeyes restaurant that was sort of next to my little mini hotel thing it's like a residence, I guess you could call it. It reminded me of a harem because the ceilings were all made out of like sheets or fabric that bellowed down into the center, but with a bunch of bunk beds and stuff in it. So I heard that oscillating sound all the way up until, from that entire walk, which must have been 45 minutes or something, all the way up until I got into up until I got to Popeyes. And at the time, they had chicken for $1 a piece. And naturally, I try to be hospitable, and I try to be somebody to raise morale, so I grab like 20 pieces of chicken, throw them in a garbage bag, which seems pretty silly talking about it now, but I fill a garbage bag with $20 worth of chicken. At this point, I've already asked 15, 20 people about if they heard this noise or not that I'd been hearing. Of course, everybody said no. It was very obvious of a sound to me. So I get into the Popeyes, I fill my garbage bag with chicken. Luckily, it was before the time where they infused the garbage bags with Febreze-like smells, so at least wasn't that contaminated. So I get my garbage bag of chicken, I walk it back to my harem-esque place, and I go to the coffee table, or whatever the central table is, and I pull straight up on my garbage bag, and all the chicken legs fall out. Then I ask my quote-unquote bandmates if they had heard anything. And they too didn't hear anything, but that didn't stop them from gobbling up 9/10 of my chicken. And at that same sitting, I suppose, I learned that whatever they put in the chicken in or on Hollywood Boulevard makes your pupils dilate. Because I was staring at my bandmates and their pupils were dilated, and I thought, hey, I wonder if these guys aren't taking this seriously and they're doing some drugs or whatever while I was gone. And then I looked at myself in the mirror and I saw my own pupils dilated. So whatever was dilating them, it was in the chicken. And if you heard my ramblings, well, I just want to take this moment to thank you, I guess. I plan on doing, well, really whatever anybody requests. The channel is called Supernormal M, which implies things that are out of the ordinary. So I thought I would start with some paranormal things and some just generally unexplained things for myself. Reddit has banned me 4 times in my attempts of curating my own list of stories, so in lieu of that, I don't want to not post. So, hope you enjoyed what you heard. And if you want to see the format that I hope to do in the future, assuming that my Reddit accounts become unbanned, check the first video. Here's a thumbnail or a link to that one, because that's the one that means more to me. Is I'd like to be able to actually comment and connect with the people who are listening to me, rather than have my producer for the other channel write weird AI comments that quite frankly offend me. But since I'm sort of stuck in a different country and I'm a creative person and I'm not much of a businessman, I do rely on that channel in order to eat. So, thanks for listening. I appreciate it, and any comments that you write on that page I do see, even though I can't comment on them. But feel free to comment over here. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Thanks.